While historically many of these small improvements in efficiency have not been able to be economically viable, the addition of looking in the crystal ball at likely higher electricity costs and the impact of these potentially high fines of building performance now makes a lot of those energy efficiency projects very viable and very attractive for investment. So bring your upper management in, help them understand the risks and the unknowns that are coming our way, help them understand we can mitigate those risks by making our building more efficient, while at the same time making our buildings more attractive than the competitors building across the street to those prospective tenants out there.
Hello and welcome to the REIT Report. I'm your host, Sarah Borkson-Keto. Joining me today is Randy Moss, an industry principal at Yardi with over 30 years of experience in energy management and sustainability systems. Yardi is a Nareit real estate sustainability partner, and Randy is here to discuss the relationship between regulatory costs and net asset value, and how improving energy and utility data quality can reduce risk and support stronger REIT valuations. Randy, thanks for coming back on the podcast.
Thanks, Sarah. It's good to be here.
Great. So, Randy, to start off, can you talk about how investors are valuing buildings when seeking candidate properties for a portfolio?
Sure. REIT owners and managers, of course, all have their own secret sauce they apply to building valuations and how they create pro formas. But generally, everyone is weighing heavily cash flows as a basis for future indicator of building performance and current net asset value. So these cash flows are really important, and we have investors looking to improve areas of the market that may not focus on cash flows, but they are definitely a minority. So we like to see investments that impact the properties in ways that improve efficiency and improve the property so that it provides an increased opportunity to see maximized rents per square foot and occupancy.
And what are some of the new things impacting building net asset value today?
For new things, and we want to focus on recent changes and market trends, that there are two things that are really impacting the market today. Number one is new regulations, even new types of regulations. And number two is the likelihood of higher energy costs in the near future.
And can you talk about the types of regulations, of new regulations that are impacting investment decisions today?
Sure. So building owners have been used to what we call benchmarking regulations, where you report data. A lot of North America uses Energy Star, but this reporting is growing up into new regulations called building performance standards. And these are looking at the data that we have historically reported on, and they're putting caps on the energy and greenhouse gas. And those new regulations are coming with significant penalties. So they are truly impacting cash flows when you look at them long term.
And Randy, can you just explain a little bit more about building performance standards?
Sure. So the idea and the driver behind building performance standards is to mitigate climate change impact on buildings over time. And these regulations are measuring various things, generally greenhouse gas emissions and energy usage, and then putting caps on those numbers. It's based on building type and square footage of the building, and exceeding those caps can result in some very scary penalties. Just as an example, most people in the REIT industry now are well aware of New York City's Local Law 97, the atom of the clan, if you will, for building performance standards. It was the first one enacted and in force. And first reporting year was in 2025 using the previous calendar year's data. So we've got a year and we're into the second year of reporting now for Local Law 97. New York City identified 27,000 buildings, I think, that are impacted by this, and proudly proclaimed that 85% of the buildings were compliant without having to do any significant changes or upgrades. And that still leaves about 4,000 buildings out of compliance with this law. We don't have hard numbers from the city of New York on penalties and the fines that were assessed. But a nationally recognized consulting firm looked at the top 100 buildings based on publicly available data through Energy Star, Local Law 88 reporting and things. And they estimated the average penalty for the 100 buildings with the worst penalties was $1 million per building. So the top 100 were averaging $1 million per building. And frankly, nobody's pro forma can take that type of hit to cash flow. So that is why building performance standards are so important to pay attention to.
Absolutely. So, Randy, would you say that once a building is compliant with BPS requirements, are the costs of compliance complete at that stage?
No, unfortunately not. These compliance requirements, and by the way, there are like approximately 20 jurisdictions that have rolled out these compliance requirements, and there's another 25 or 30 in the process of developing these regulations. They're somewhere on the roadmap to getting it done. But all of these regulations share a recurring reporting cycle. Some are every year, some are 3 years, some are 5 years. And also, in addition to having to report on a recurring basis, there is the pathway through these regulations where the permissible emissions or permissible energy use thresholds get tighter over time. And so New York City said today 15% of buildings are not compliant, but that number goes up considerably when you look at the changes scheduled for 2030. They significantly lower the threshold, so many more buildings will be non-compliant at that point.
So, Randy, how important is it to have ongoing, really accurate data?
Accurate data, let's talk about that in 2 layers. First of all, everybody in the industry seems to understand they need good data on the energy use in the building. So how many kilowatt hours of electricity, therms of gas, or whatever your metric measurement is. There's a second layer of data that is critical, and that is what's going on inside your buildings. This is much more qualitative data than quantitative, yet it has as big an impact on your scores and the amount of greenhouse gas emissions that are permitted. Case study recently, I had a customer started using services at Yardi for this, and our first year of reporting, their energy use in the building went way up significantly. The customer says to me, it's the same tenant's been in there 10 years. It shouldn't have been this huge spike. Go check your data. So there was a lot of back and forth, a lot of everything going on and trying to understand. At the end of the day, we determined that the tenant in the building exercised a clause in their lease that let them sublet part of the building. And they sublet part of a large warehouse to a company that brought in ovens and was a commercial bakery. So the building owner had no idea. But being able to segregate and account for the additional needed energy for different building use types is just as important as measuring that energy in the building.
And Randy, would you say that AI is helping the process in terms of collecting data? Is it making it quicker, less expensive?
I'm going to say yes, but with a big but attached to the yes. The caveat is AI certainly is more efficient. It can give you data much more quickly, but it can also give you bad data. So with AI, it is critically important you keep a human in the loop to look at things. Things to think about with AI is 2 uses, is looking at your energy usage, trying to use some sort of an AI engine to analyze and read utility bills. Think about a utility bill that gets corrected. As we all have dealt with over the years, utilities like to rebill when they realize a meter was broken, or they had to estimate for a few months because a water meter was frozen into the ground or something. So those corrected bills that can go back several months actually are far easier for an accounting department to do a GL entry for the cost change and where the cost occurred, as compared to a sustainability analyst looking at that consumption data in the correction and then saying, do I weather normalize it? How do I understand where it was used? So AI can help with all this, but you need the human who can apply the really deep logic to be sure your consumption is right. The second area AI is helpful is generating estimates to fill gaps in data. Also important to keep a human in the loop there because estimates may need to be calendarized. They may need to be weather normalized. There's certainly cycles impacted by temperatures, and estimates are important, but they need to consider those things. Finally, when using estimates, a key component of the building performance standards we talked about is third-party audits are almost universally required. And auditors require an audit trail back to the source document. So if you're going to use AI to create estimates, you're going to have to be able to document the AI data sources that were the inputs for the estimate, calculations, and the AI logic so that it can be verified by auditors to confirm your numbers are matching the intended purpose of the estimates.
Randy, let's talk about something which everyone can notice these days, and that's higher electricity costs. What's driving that? And is those increases, is that something we've seen in the past?
Utility rates going up is a fact of life, always has been in commercial real estate. But I had the opportunity in January of this year to attend the largest gathering of electric utility industries. These are the electric companies. And by far, the hot topic that all the electric companies are talking about is data center demand on the grid. And the second tier behind that, the need for EV charging for electric vehicles. So those things are definitely going to impact utility rates. And as everyone, I don't have to tell this crowd, utility rates tend to be more focused. When they go up, they tend to hit commercial real estate more than individual single resident type rates. So the electric rates going up, there's a lot of debate in the industry now. There's a lot of states that have said they will make sure that data centers pay their fair share. And we have seen states such as Virginia, Georgia, and Florida where the build out of infrastructure has resulted in lower rates to homeowners, which is a net positive if you pay a bill at home. However, there's a great deal of concern that the data centers may go through an evolution where there could be a reduction in demand. And as rates are impacted, you have to consider the generation that must be increased. So maybe building more plants to generate electricity. And then there's the large transmission lines, many that are interstate transmission with the grid interconnects that have to be built out for the extra demand as well. So while state regulators can certainly influence local electric rates, they may not always have influence over interstate transmission nor the cost of generation. Once those are built out, even if data center demand does drop through efficiency or from narrowing of that market, the transmission and generation infrastructure will be there for 20 to 50 years that has to be paid for. So all of this is bringing a lot of risk in the form of unknowns on future electric rates. It seems the common opinion across the room is electricity will be going up significantly in the next several years.
That's not good news.
No, not for building owners.
And Randy, as you look ahead, can you talk about other factors that may be impacting commercial real estate valuations?
So in the future, we talked about electric going up. There are going to be more building performance standards. And in the building performance standard world, if you look in the rearview mirror several years, politics always comes into everything we do, it seems. In the previous administration, there were a set of rules to support building performance standards being enacted through the Securities and Exchange Commission. The SEC greenhouse gas reporting rules were rescinded by this administration. However, the political pendulum always swings, and we will see some point in the future when we will probably have a national reporting requirement for greenhouse gas, leaning towards caps and building performance standard at a national level for some number of companies or buildings. So those things have to be considered because that future impact to cash flows certainly can be depreciated back into today's net present value of buildings. And the less we know about those things, the higher the risk associated that is being applied to the valuations.
And other steps that building owners can take to mitigate some of these risks that you've discussed?
Sure. It's always good to have some blocks to check and things to do. Let me share some common things I've heard around the industry that appear to make sense, and we're seeing a lot of forward-thinking building owners doing today. Number one, let's talk about electric supply first. The good news is we have a generally stable grid in the United States and Canada. North America is blessed with energy, and things look like we will continue to have a stable grid. Maybe a few localized geographic areas might have some brownouts or things, but generally we're in good shape. Things building owners can do to defend themselves against these higher coming electric prices would be identify your properties that are in deregulated territories and negotiate favorable energy contracts, whatever favorable looks like in any investor's risk portfolio. If you're worried rates may really jump in 3 years, maybe you can lock in a deregulated rate for 5 years. A lot of things to do, a lot of creative, and a lot of smart people working on deregulated rates. Look at that and look at it hard. Number two, make sure your tenants are aware of these expected increases in energy cost. Many of the REITs have triple net buildings where tenants are responsible. And having good discussions with tenants about this does two things. It lets them know that, one, you're plugged in and trying to have an efficient building, so they will have a comfort level with re-signing the lease. And two, having an efficient building encourages that tenant to sign a lease extension or for a new tenant to come into that efficient building because of the lower energy costs. Third check block that we're seeing people working on is looking carefully every time they are touching a building. It goes back to the old, you can't manage what you can't measure. And as you're working on a building, the systems and hardware in a building that is needed to understand a tenant level or an area of the building use or building even system specific, which chillers are performing well, which are not. Installing all of that monitoring equipment on its own can be very expensive. However, if you're doing it as part of a building upgrade, whether it's tenant improvement, a remodel, something else you're doing on the building, adding in those extra components to be able to accurately measure this energy in the future is going to enable you understanding the building to be able to manage it well and to provide the efficiencies that are attractive to tenants, keep it leased up, and be successful. So those are our three areas. Negotiate supply where you can, engage your tenants so they're aware of what's going on, and take advantage of any time the building is being touched for major work, for remodels, to go ahead and proactively install that data equipment that can help you monitor the energy going forward.
And what about the BPS regulations? Any steps there?
BPS. Let me give a few recommendations and things we're seeing here. Remember, BPS is new. The first reporting year was 2025 in New York City, and we're seeing more programs rolling out now. This is very early in the process. But for BPS properties, and this is a good recommendation for any properties, would encourage everyone to include lease language to pass along penalties for excessive greenhouse gas or other penalty costs to tenants that are related to things tenants can control, like energy use, energy selection choices, things like that. This will help make your tenants, your partners, and your efficiency of the building, which ultimately will reduce that. And hopefully, again, we're making tenants happy and comfortable so that they will continue to be our tenants. And really important, I've had discussions with customers over the years who have put this type of language in. And historically, it has been sometimes negotiated out of the lease. And I would ask that everyone consider making this a hard no, that you need to keep that ability to pass through penalties associated with your building that are beyond your control and in the hands of tenants. That's one. For BPS, create that ability that I've talked about with controlling electricity use, where you can accurately measure and understand and help your tenants measure their energy use. It's measure, manage, improve, and then repeat the process. It's a perpetual thing. Starts with measurement, so be sure you can follow through that. Always engage tenants. Another thing you can do is be aware of what's coming. These building performance standards are a very moving target and rapidly evolving and spreading across North America. So knowing when a new building performance standard is going to hit your buildings in, say, the state of California, who is discussing a statewide building performance standard for potential enactment in 2028. Knowing that's coming and understanding what the impact could be certainly can apply and look into the future and say, how is this going to impact my building valuation? So you need a system or a good report or the right people who can track and understand when something new is coming at you in the future. And the last piece of advice I will give is on building performance standards, but it's also applicable to energy. And this, if there's one thing to take away from this entire discussion, I would say this is the top of my list. And that is for those who speak sustainability and are monitoring this consumption in greenhouse gas and understand BPS. It is up to us to involve upper management and make them aware of these impacts and what's coming with utility costs, higher energy costs, the impact of building performance standards on net asset values. And by bringing in the upper management to this level of understanding, we can leverage that shared knowledge so that they can support what is needed to make our buildings more efficient, more attractive to tenants, and hopefully always in compliant with building performance standards in the future. It's important, and I call myself a recovering energy manager, but like many people that have been in this business, it seems every year we work very hard putting together proposals for efficiency improvements. And those proposals often are the victims of the budget cycles because there's limited capital to spend and it has to be spent where it gives the best return. So while historically many of these small improvements in efficiency have not been able to be economically viable, the addition of looking in the crystal ball at likely higher electricity costs and the impact of these potentially high fines of building performance now makes a lot of those energy efficiency projects very viable and very attractive for investment. So bring your upper management in, help them understand the risks and the unknowns that are coming our way, help them understand we can mitigate those risks by making our building more efficient, while at the same time making our buildings more attractive than the competitors building across the street to those prospective tenants out there.
Excellent. Randy, thank you so much. This has been very timely and relevant and very practical advice. So appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I enjoyed talking with you again.
Thank you. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform.